Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We are going to be exploring a topic that I think a lot of us have had a lot of thoughts on, but maybe haven't explored as deeply, and that's addiction.
Ooh, very excited.
And the way we're going to do that is by looking at a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts
Oh, yeah,
by Dr. Gabor Mate. Now, have you heard of this book?
I have. I have. It's pretty incredible. He's got such a unique perspective, especially because of his experience working with people dealing with addiction in Vancouver's downtown east side.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that drew me to this book was the fact that it wasn't just sort of a theoretical look at it.
Yeah.
It was really grounded in real-world experience.
Definitely. Like he worked at the Portland Hotel Society.
Yeah.
And I think that hands-on approach really comes through in his writing. You can tell he's not just talking about addiction. He's been there with people in the trenches,
Yeah.
seeing the struggles firsthand.
And that's really what we're going to be looking at today in this deep dive. It's not just sort of like, here's the definition of addiction. It's really about like, how do we understand it? How do we move beyond just those easy answers like, oh, it's a moral failing or, people should just have more willpower.
Right, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about Mate's work is that he really challenges that narrative. He's like, no, addiction is so much more than that. It's this profound response to pain. It's people trying to cope with something deeper. And when you start to look at it through that lens, it completely changes how you view everything about it.
So let's actually dive into that a little bit
Right. Sure.
because I think for a lot of people, when they hear addiction, the first thing that comes to mind might be drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, for sure.
But Mate's definition is so much broader than that.
It is. And I think one quote that really stuck with me is when he talks about Thomas de Quincey, a 19th century figure who used opium. De Quincey said that opium could tranquilize all irritations of the nervous system. Right. And I think that really gets at the heart of what Mate is saying. It's about this desperate search for relief. And it doesn't really matter what the substance or behavior is. It's that underlying need to soothe something, to escape from something.
And so when you're working with people like, in the downtown east side, did you see that, like those stories of people really just desperately looking for some kind of relief?
Oh, absolutely. One story that Mate tells is about a young woman named Carol who turned to crystal meth and heroin after running away from home at just 15, you know? And her story, like so many others, just really highlighted that yearning for connection, for a sense of belonging, and for relief from the pain.
That's so powerful. And it kind of makes you rethink that whole idea of addict, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not just a label. These are human beings with complex stories and complex pain.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that Mate really drives home throughout the book. He's like, let's look beyond the behaviors and try to understand the person behind the addiction.
And part of understanding that person is understanding their past, right?
Mm.
Because Mate talks a lot about the link between childhood trauma and addiction. And that can be a really heavy topic, but I think it's also really important to understand.
Yeah, I think it's crucial to understanding addiction. He talks about how those early childhood experiences, those early traumas can have a real impact on brain development, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control and emotional regulation.
So you're saying that trauma can literally change the way our brains work.
Yeah, it's like imagine building a house on a foundation with cracks. It's not going to be as stable. And the same goes for our brains. Those early experiences lay the foundation for how we respond to stress, how we regulate our emotions, how we make decisions. And if that foundation is shaky, it's going to be harder to cope with life's challenges.
And does that mean that everyone who experiences trauma will become addicted?
No, not at all. It's not a direct cause and effect thing. It's more about vulnerability. It's like certain experiences can increase the likelihood that someone might turn to addictive behaviors as a way to cope.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and Mate actually uses the example of his own son, Daniel. Daniel described his childhood as loving, but not really feeling truly seen or appreciated for who he was.
And so even without those like big T traumas, like those really extreme events,
Right.
those smaller things can still leave a mark.
Exactly. Those subtle but persistent experiences of disconnection can also create this kind of underlying sense of emptiness or unease that people might try to fill later on in life.
So it's like those early experiences create this kind of pattern of seeking comfort and connection. And then when people face challenges or pain later on, they might fall back on those same patterns, even if those patterns aren't healthy in the long run,
Exactly. They're just trying to soothe that same underlying pain.
which I guess is why Mate is so adamant that punishing addicts isn't the answer.
Yeah, because punishment just perpetuates that cycle of pain and trauma. It's like adding fuel to the fire instead of putting it out.
And it doesn't address the underlying causes, right? Like the pain, the trauma, the disconnection.
Right. It's just a temporary fix that ultimately makes things worse.
And that's where he brings in that whole idea of the war on drugs, right?
Yeah, he's very critical of it. He talks about how it's been this incredibly costly and ultimately ineffective approach. Like, he uses this really striking example of a man who made $190,000 dealing drugs, but after 10 months, he only walked away with $10,000.
Oh, wow.
It just shows how much of it is driven by desperation and need, not some kind of like greed or malicious intent.
Right. So it's not about punishing people. It's about understanding them. It's about helping them heal those underlying wounds. And I think that's where that whole concept of harm reduction comes in.
Exactly. And Mattei is a big advocate for harm reduction. It's about meeting people where they are, acknowledging the reality of their struggles, and offering support without judgment.
And so that's things like safe injection sites.
Exactly. Things like safe injection sites, needle exchanges, even just having open and honest conversations about drug use without shaming or blaming people. It's about creating a safer space for people to get the help they need.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of debate around things like safe injection sites.
For sure.
People saying like, oh, you're just encouraging drug use. But Mattei would say that's not what it's about at all. Right.
Right. He talks about Insight, North America's first legal supervised injection site. It's in Vancouver, and it's been incredibly successful in reducing overdoses, connecting people with health care and support services, and ultimately helping people move towards recovery. It's not about enabling drug use. It's about saving lives and offering people a chance to get better.
So it's about compassion. It's about understanding. It's about really seeing the human being behind the addiction.
Exactly. And one of the things I really love about Matei's book is that he illustrates all of this so beautifully through the stories he shares. Like, there's one story about a man named Remy who confessed to Matei that he'd killed someone while he was high.
Oh, wow. I can't even imagine having to hear that. What did Mattei do?
It's incredible because instead of judging Remy or condemning him, Matei focused on Remy's deep need for forgiveness and his struggle to connect with his own heart. He saw the pain, the remorse, the humanity beneath the actions.
That's so powerful. And I think it really speaks to Mattei's whole approach. He's not just trying to analyze addiction from a distance. He's really trying to get to the heart of what it means to be human, what it means to struggle, what it means to heal.
He really is. And that's what makes In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts such a compelling read. It's not just about addiction. It's about empathy. It's about understanding the human condition in all its complexity.
So for anyone listening who might be thinking, this sounds really interesting, but I don't know if I want to dive into a whole book on addiction, what would you say to them?
I'd say give it a chance. You might be surprised by what you discover. It's a journey worth taking, trust me.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm definitely adding it to my reading list.
One thing that really stuck with me from the book is this idea of addiction as a child not released.
Mm.
Like, he talks about how addicts are often stuck in this childlike state, searching for something they missed out on earlier in life.
It's like they're still trying to get those needs met that weren't met when they were younger.
Exactly, and he goes beyond just the psychological aspect of it. He actually dives into the science behind it, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, he explains how trauma can actually alter brain development, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which plays a huge role in things like impulse control and decision-making.
So it's like, even if someone wants to stop him, their brain might be working against them.
Yeah, in a way, it's like they're trying to fight this uphill battle with their own biology.
That's intense.
It is, and I think that's why it's so crucial to understand this link between trauma and addiction,
Right.
because it helps us move beyond those simplistic explanations like, oh, they just lack willpower, or they're making bad choices.
It's so much more complex than that.
It really is. It's about recognizing that there's this whole underlying neurological component that's often at play.
And that's why Mattei is so against punishing addicts, right?
Exactly. Punishment doesn't heal the trauma. It doesn't address those underlying needs. It just adds more pain to the equation.
And that brings us back to harm reduction.
Exactly. Harm reduction is about meeting people where they are, offering support without judgment, and creating a space where healing can actually happen.
And I think one of the stories that really illustrated this for me was the one about Angela, the Native woman, who ended up in the downtown East Side struggling with addiction.
Oh, yeah, that was a powerful one.
She had gone through so much trauma in her life, but Mattei talks about how there was still this spark in her, this connection to her heritage, and this memory of a place of peace from her childhood.
It's like even in the midst of all that darkness, there was still this flicker of hope. this resilience that was just waiting to be nurtured.
It's a beautiful reminder that even though addiction can take over someone's life, it doesn't completely erase who they are.
Absolutely. And I think that's what Mattei is trying to get us to see. He's saying, let's look beyond the addiction. Let's see the human being. Let's recognize their inherent worth and dignity.
And that's where compassion comes in.
Exactly. Compassion is the antidote to shame and judgment. It's the key to unlocking healing and transformation.
You know, it's funny because when I think about Mattei's work, I often think about him in the context of helping other people.
Right.
But he actually talks about his own struggles with addiction in the book.
Oh, yeah, he does. He's very open about his own experience with compulsive CD buying.
Wait, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. He talks about how he would spend hours browsing through record stores searching for that perfect CD that would somehow fill this void within him.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's walked the walk too.
Exactly. And I think that makes his message all the more powerful because he's speaking from a place of deep personal understanding.
It also kind of makes you think about your own life,
Yeah.
right? Like we all have our own ways of coping with stress and pain, and sometimes those ways might not be the healthiest.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of Mattei's work. It's not just about understanding addiction. It's about understanding ourselves and the human condition as a whole.
It's about recognizing that we all have our own hungry ghosts, as he puts it. Those unmet needs, those unhealed wounds that we're all trying to make sense of.
Exactly. And by understanding addiction, we can start to understand those deeper parts of ourselves and each other. We can start to cultivate more compassion, both for ourselves and for the people around us.
And that's a powerful message.
It really is.
So for anyone listening who might be thinking, okay, this is all really interesting, but what does it have to do with me? What would you say?
I'd say that even if you've never personally struggled with addiction, you probably know someone who has, or you've been affected by it in some way. And even beyond that, Mattei's insights into trauma and healing and compassion are relevant to all of us. Like, even if you've never struggled with a substance use disorder, we all have our own ways of coping with difficult emotions and challenging life experiences.
Totally. And I think one of the things that really struck me from this conversation is how much those early childhood experiences really shape us.
Oh, absolutely. Those early experiences lay the foundation for how we see the world, how we relate to others, how we cope with stress. They can have a huge impact on our lives, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
Yeah, it's like those little cracks in the foundation that you were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And sometimes those cracks can lead to bigger problems down the line if they're not addressed. But the good news is that healing is always possible.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most hopeful things about Mattei's work. He's not saying that we're doomed by our past. He's saying that we can understand it, we can learn from it, and we can move forward.
Right. It's about recognizing those patterns, those hungry ghosts, as he calls them, and finding healthier ways to meet those needs.
And it's about offering that same compassion and understanding to others, right?
Absolutely. Because we all have our own struggles, our own ways of coping, and when we can see each other's humanity, when we can connect with that shared experience of being human, then we can start to break down those walls of judgment and shame.
It's about creating a world where it's okay to not be okay, where it's okay to ask for help, and where we're all supported in our journey towards healing.
Exactly. And I think that's what Mattei's work ultimately boils down to. It's a call for compassion, a call for connection, a call for a more humane and understanding world.
I love that. And I think it's a message that we all need to hear. So as we wrap up this deep dive into In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, I just want to leave our listeners with this Holt. What resonated with you most from this conversation? What assumptions were challenged? And how can you apply this newfound understanding to your own life and your interactions with others?
Whether it's being more mindful of your own hungry ghosts or offering a listening ear to someone who's struggling, remember that even small acts of kindness can make a big difference. We're all in this together.
In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts is a powerful reminder that connection is the antidote to addiction, and that by understanding and addressing the root causes of suffering, we can create a more compassionate and healing world for everyone. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.